Jack Morrison rode his horse slowly through the dusty trail, his weathered hat pulled low against the setting sun. He'd been traveling for 3 days straight, looking for work on any ranch that would take him. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him that his last meal was yesterday morning. The 28-year-old cowboy had spent most of his life moving from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. As he crested a small hill, Jack saw smoke rising from a chimney in the distance. A small wooden house sat nestled in a green valley, with a vegetable garden and a few chickens pecking around the yard. It looked like the kind of place where decent folks lived, the kind who might spare a meal for a hungry traveler. Jack guided his horse toward the house, hoping for some kindness from strangers. When he reached the front porch, a young woman stepped outside. She had long brown hair tied back in a simple braid and wore a faded blue dress that had seen many washings. Name was Sarah Mitchell, though Jack didn't know it yet. She looked at the dusty cowboy with curious but cautious eyes. "Good evening, miss," Jack said, tipping his hat politely. "I was wondering if I might trouble you for some water for my horse and maybe directions to the nearest town." Sarah studied his face for a moment. She had learned to read people quickly. Living on the frontier? This man looked tired and hungry, but his eyes were honest and kind. "The nearest town is Millfield, about 15 miles north," she said. "But you won't make it there before dark, and the road can be dangerous at night." Before Jack could respond, a voice called from inside the house. "Sarah, who's out there?" An older woman appeared in the doorway, followed by 3 small children, who peeked around her skirts with wide eyes. The woman was Sarah's mother, Martha Mitchell, a widow who had been raising her family alone since her husband died 2 years ago. "It's just a traveler, Mama," Sarah replied. "It's asking for directions." Martha looked at Jack with the same careful attention her daughter had shown. She noticed his thin frame and the way he sat slightly slumped in his saddle from exhaustion. "When did you last eat, young man?" she asked directly. Jack's cheeks reddened slightly. "Yesterday morning, ma'am? But I don't want to be any trouble. Just water for my horse would be fine." "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "Help the gentleman with his horse. We're just sitting down to supper, and there's plenty to go around." She turned back to Jack. "I'm Martha Mitchell, and this is my daughter Sarah. Those little faces behind me belong to my other children." Jack climbed down from his horse, feeling overwhelmed by their unexpected kindness. "I'm Jack Morrison, ma'am. Much obliged for your generosity, but I should mention I don't have much money to pay you." "Did I ask for money?" Martha replied, with a gentle smile. "Round here we help folks who need helping. That's just how things are done." Sarah led Jack's horse to a small corral behind the house, while Martha ushered him inside. The house was small, but clean and warm. A wooden table sat in the center of the main room, set with simple dishes and surrounded by mismatched chairs. The smell of fresh bread and vegetable stew filled the air, making Jack's stomach growl again. The 3 younger children introduced themselves shyly. There was 10-year-old Emma, 8-year-old Tom, and 5-year-old little Mary. They had never seen a real cowboy up close before, and they stared at Jack's boots and hat with fascination. "Sit yourself down," Martha said, ladling stew into a bowl for Jack. "Sarah, bring some of that bread from the kitchen." As they ate together, Jack learned about the Mitchell family. Martha's husband had been a farmer who dreamed of building a prosperous homestead. After he died from pneumonia, Martha had struggled to keep the farm going with just Sarah's help. The children were too young to do much heavy work, and money was always tight. "What kind of work do you do, Mr. Morrison?" Sarah asked as she passed him a second helping of bread. "I'm a ranch hand mostly," Jack replied. "I can handle cattle, horses, farming, building, pretty much whatever needs doing. I've been looking for steady work, but most ranchers around these parts already have all the help they need." Martha and Sarah exchanged a meaningful glance. They had been talking for weeks about needing help with the farm, especially with harvest time coming. But they couldn't afford to pay hired help, and most men wouldn't want to work for a widow and her children anyway. "We've got plenty of work here," Martha said carefully. "More than we can handle, truth be told. The problem is, we can't pay much in the way of wages." Jack set down his spoon and looked around the table at their kind faces. "What kind of work?" "Farm work, mostly," Sarah explained. harvesting the corn and vegetables, repairing the barn, roof before winter, fixing fences. Papa always said this land could support a good-sized farm if someone just put in the effort. I'm not afraid of hard work, Jack said. And right now, I'm more interested in a place to stay than in wages. If you've got somewhere I could sleep and maybe share your meals, I'd be happy to work for that. The children's faces lit up with excitement at the prospect of having Jack stay, but Martha looked uncertain. I don't know, Mr. Morrison. It wouldn't be proper, you being an unmarried man and all. I understand your concerns, ma'am, Jack said respectfully. Maybe I could sleep in the barn. I've done it plenty of times before. Little Mary spoke up for the first time. Mama, can the cowboy stay, please? Martha looked at her children's hopeful faces. Then at Sarah, who nodded slightly. They really did need help, and Jack seemed like a decent man, she said finally. I suppose we could try it for a while and see how things work out, Jack. He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the hot stew. For the first time in years, he might have found a place where he was truly welcome. The next morning, Jack woke before sunrise in the barn loft, where he had made his bed in the hay. He had slept better than he had in months, feeling safe and welcome for the first time in years. The sound of roosters crowing and the gentle lowing of the family's 2 milk cows told him it was time to start the day when he climbed down from the loft. Sarah was already in the barn with a bucket, preparing to milk the cows. She looked surprised to see him up so early. Good morning, Miss Sarah, Jack said, putting on his hat. Let me take care of that for you. Oh, you don't need to, Sarah protested. I've been doing the milking for 2 years now. I know you have, Jack replied gently, taking the bucket from her hands. But I'm here to help now. Why don't you go start breakfast while I handle the morning chores? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then smiled gratefully. She had been carrying so much responsibility since her father died, and it felt strange but wonderful. To have someone offer to share the load, Jack made quick work of milking the cows, feeding the chickens, and collecting eggs. He also noticed several things that needed fixing around the farm. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. Several fence posts were loose. Part of the chicken coop had a hole that foxes could easily get through when he came into the house. Carrying the milk and eggs, Martha was stirring a pot of porridge while the children sat around the table rubbing sleep from their eyes. The smell of coffee filled the warm kitchen. My goodness, you've been busy, Martha said, impressed. Sarah usually doesn't finish the morning chores until after breakfast. It's no trouble at all, ma'am, Jack said, setting the milk and eggs on the counter. I noticed a few things that could use some attention around the place, if you don't mind my saying so. After breakfast, Jack spent the day working on repairs while the family went about their daily routines. He fixed the barn door, reinforced the loose fence posts, and patched the hole in the chicken coop. The children followed him around, fascinated by his tools and asking endless questions about life as a cowboy. Did you ever fight Indians? Tom asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Did you ever catch bad guys? Emma chimed in. Jack laughed at their enthusiasm. Mostly I just took care of cattle and horses, he explained. Real cowboy life isn't quite as exciting as the stories make it sound. Mostly it's hard work, long days, and sleeping under the stars. As the days passed, Jack settled into a comfortable routine with the Mitchell family. He would wake early, do the morning chores, spend the day working on various farm projects, and then join the family for supper each evening. Children grew more attached to him every day, and even Martha began to relax around him. Sarah found herself looking forward to their conversations during the day. Jack was well-traveled and had many interesting stories to tell. He treated her with respect and listened to her opinions, which was different from most men she had known. She began to realize that her feelings toward him were growing into something more than gratitude. One evening, about 2 weeks after Jack's arrival, Martha made an announcement at dinner. I've been thinking, she said, looking around the table at her family and their guest. Winter will be here before we know it, and there's still so much work to be done. The corn needs harvesting, firewood needs cutting, and the roof needs proper repairs before the first snow. Jack nodded. I'll stay as long as you'll have me, Mrs. Mitchell. This place is starting to feel like home. Little Mary clapped her hands happily. Does that mean you're going to stay forever? Jack's eyes met Sarah's across the table, and both of them looked away quickly, their cheeks slightly pink. "Well," Jack said carefully, "I reckon that depends on whether your mama and sister want me to stay." Martha noticed the look that had passed between Jack and Sarah, and she felt a mixture of hope and concern. Jack was a good man, and she could see that Sarah cared for him, but she also knew that their situation was complicated. They needed Jack's help, but she worried about what people in town might say about an unmarried man living with them. That night, after the children were in bed, Martha asked Sarah to sit with her on the front porch. The evening air was cool, and crickets chirped in the darkness. "Sarah, honey," Martha began carefully, "I can see that you've grown fond of Jack." Sarah's face turned red even in the dim light. "Is it that obvious? To a mother's eyes?" "Yes," Martha said with a gentle smile. "And I think he's fond of you, too. But we need to think about what's best for everyone." "What do you mean, Mama?" Martha sighed. "People in town are already starting to talk about us having an unmarried man living here. Mrs. Henderson mentioned it when I went to buy supplies last week. She wasn't mean about it, but she was concerned about our reputation." Sarah felt her heart sink. She had been happier in the past 2 weeks than she had been since her father died, and much of that happiness was due to Jack's presence. "Are you saying he has to leave?" "I'm not sure what I'm saying yet," Martha admitted. "We need to figure out a proper solution. Jack is a good man, and we need his help. But we also need to protect our family's reputation." Inside the house, Jack lay in his bedroll in the barn, staring up at the wooden beams and thinking similar thoughts. He had never felt so content anywhere, but he knew that his presence might be causing problems for the Mitchell family. The last thing he wanted was to hurt the people who had shown him such kindness. He thought about Sarah's smile, the way the children ran to greet him when he came in from work, and Martha's motherly care. This family had given him something he had never expected to find: a sense of belonging. But he was also realistic enough to know that society had rules, and unmarried men didn't live with respectable families without causing talk. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor that would change everything for the Mitchell family and their cowboy guest. The visitor arrived just after breakfast, riding up to the house on a fancy black horse. He was a well-dressed man in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit and a gold watch chain. His name was Harold Benson, and he was the banker from Millfield, who held the mortgage on the Mitchell farm. Martha's face went pale when she saw him approaching. She stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. Jack, who had been repairing a section of fence nearby, noticed her distress and moved closer to the house. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell," Benson said, removing his hat with false politeness. "I hope you're well, Mr. Benson," Martha replied stiffly. "What brings you out here?" The banker's eyes swept over the property, taking in the improvements Jack had made. "I'm afraid I have some business to discuss with you. May I come inside?" Martha reluctantly invited him in, and Sarah quickly gathered the children and sent them outside to play. Jack continued working, but he stayed close enough to hear the conversation through the open windows. Mrs. Mitchell Benson began, settling into the best chair without being invited. "I'm sure you're aware that your mortgage payment was due last week." Martha's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "Yes, sir. Was hoping to bring it to town this week. The harvest isn't quite finished yet, and I'm afraid we've had this conversation before," Benson interrupted. "You were late with your payment 3 months ago, and again last month. The bank can't continue to extend these deadlines indefinitely." Sarah moved closer to her mother, her face filled with worry. The family had been struggling financially since her father's death, and they all knew how precarious their situation was. "How much do we owe?" Martha asked quietly. $250 for the overdue payments, plus interest," Benson replied coldly. "And I'm afraid the bank has decided we need some assurance that future payments will be made on time." "Kind of assurance?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Benson smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Well, I've been thinking about this property quite a lot lately. Some of the best farmland in the county, and with the right management, it could be very profitable. I'm prepared to make you an offer to purchase the land outright." Face went white. "This is our home, Mr. Benson. My husband built this house with his own hands." Our children were born here. I understand your sentimental attachment, Benson said dismissively. But sentiment doesn't pay debts. My offer is fair, $1,000 for the house and all the land. Sarah gasped. But the land alone is worth 3 times that much? Perhaps in better times, Benson shrugged. But given your current financial difficulties, I think you'll find it's a generous offer. You have 1 week to make your decision. Outside, Jack's hands tightened into fists as he listened to the conversation. He had seen men like Benson before, vultures who preyed on families in distress. The banker was clearly trying to steal the Mitchell farm for a fraction of its worth. After Benson left, Martha sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands while Sarah tried to comfort her. The children sensed something was wrong and huddled together quietly in the corner. Jack came inside, his hat in his hands. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. I couldn't help but overhear. That man is trying to rob you. What choice do we have? Martha asked through her tears. We don't have $250. We barely have enough money to buy supplies for winter. There has to be another way, Sarah said desperately. This is our home. We can't just give it up. Jack sat down at the table across from them. How much could you make from selling the harvest? Maybe $50, Martha replied. The corn crop is good this year, but it's still not nearly enough. What about the livestock? We need the cows for milk and the chickens for eggs, Sarah explained. If we sell them, we'd have no way to feed ourselves through winter. Jack was quiet for a moment, thinking hard. Finally, he spoke up. I have some money saved up. Not a lot, but maybe enough to help. Martha looked up at him in surprise. Oh, Jack, we couldn't ask you to do that. You've already done so much for us. You're not asking, Jack said firmly. I'm offering. How much do you have saved from the farm? Earnings. After counting every penny they had, including Jack's small savings, they came up with $180, still $70 short of what they owed. That evening, Jack made a decision that would change all their lives. He found Martha and Sarah sitting on the porch after putting the children to bed. I've been thinking about our problem, he said, settling into a chair beside them. And I think I have a solution, but it might sound a bit unusual. We're willing to listen to anything, Sarah said. Jack took a deep breath. What if Sarah and I got married? Both women stared at him in shock. Sarah felt her heart start racing, while Martha looked confused. Jack, Martha said slowly, I don't understand how that would solve our financial problem, Jack explained. If Sarah and I were married, I'd be part of the family officially. I could put my name on the deed and take responsibility for the mortgage payments. I could also get work at one of the bigger ranches now that I have a permanent address. Married men are more likely to get hired for steady positions. Face was bright red. Jack, you can't marry me just to save our farm. That wouldn't be fair to you. Jack reached over and gently took her hand. Sarah, I'm not proposing just because of the farm. I've been wanting to ask you anyway, but I didn't think I had anything to offer you. The truth is, I've grown to love you and your whole family. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to be your husband and to help take care of everyone. Sarah looked into his honest brown eyes and saw the truth of his words. She had fallen in love with this kind, hard-working man, but she had never dared hope he might feel the same way. But Jack, she said softly, even if we got married, we still wouldn't have enough money for Benson. Jack smiled. Actually, I think we would. As your husband, I could negotiate with the bank for better terms. And married men get better wages. I've already heard there might be work available as a foreman on the Thompson Ranch. Martha watched. The two young people looked at each other with growing love and hope in their eyes. Despite the circumstances, she could see that their feelings for each other were real. Are you sure about this, Jack? Martha asked. Marriage is a big step, especially with a ready-made family. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Jack replied, still holding Sarah's hand. If Sarah will have me. Sarah felt tears of happiness forming in her eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. 3 days later, Jack and Sarah stood before Reverend Williams in the small wooden church in Millfield. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with Martha and the 3 children as their only witnesses. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that little Mary had picked that morning. The children were overjoyed about the wedding. They had grown to love Jack like a father, and now he would officially be part of their Baird family. Tom proudly held the wedding rings during the ceremony, while Emma and Mary scattered flower petals at Sarah's feet as she walked down the aisle. When Reverend Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed Sarah gently, and the small congregation of their family cheered. For the first time in months, they all felt hopeful about the future. After the ceremony, the new family returned to the farm for a simple celebration dinner. Martha had prepared Sarah's favorite meal and even baked a small cake with the precious sugar she had been saving. As they sat around the familiar kitchen table, now as a complete family, everyone felt the warmth of belonging. "So what happens now?" Emma asked, looking around at the adults. "Now we work together to save our home," Jack explained. "Tomorrow I'm going to ride over to the Thompson Ranch to talk about that foreman position. If I get the job, we'll be able to make the mortgage payments and keep the farm." The next morning brought their first test as a married couple. Jack woke early as usual, but this time Sarah was already up, dressed and preparing breakfast. The awkwardness they both felt about their new sleeping arrangement was covered by their focus on the day's important mission. "I've packed you some food for the road," Sarah said, handing Jack a cloth bundle. "And I put in some of those biscuits you like." "Thank you," Jack said, touched by her thoughtfulness. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned over and kissed her cheek gently. "I'll be back before sunset." The ride to the Thompson Ranch took most of the morning. Jack had heard that Robert Thompson was a fair man who treated his workers well, but he still felt nervous as he approached the large ranch house. Everything depended on getting this job. Thompson was a tall, weathered man in his 50s who had built his ranch from nothing over the past 20 years. He looked Jack up and down carefully as they talked in his office. "So you're looking for steady work as a foreman?" Thompson said. "What experience do you have managing other men?" Jack answered honestly about his background, explaining how he had worked on various ranches and learned different aspects of cattle management. He also mentioned his recent marriage and his need for stable employment. "I heard you married the Mitchell widow's daughter," Thompson said. "How is Martha managing out there?" "She's a strong woman, but it's been hard for her since her husband died," Jack replied. "That's part of why I need this job, sir. I want to help take care of the family." Thompson nodded approvingly. He respected a man who took responsibility for his family. "I'll tell you what, Morrison, I'll give you a trial period of 3 months as assistant foreman. The pay is $60 a month, plus a share of the profits when we sell the cattle. In the spring, if you prove yourself, the job becomes permanent with a raise." Jack felt relief flood through him. $60 a month was more than enough to cover the mortgage payments and support the family. "Thank you, sir. You won't regret giving me this chance." "I hope not," Thompson said with a slight smile. "You start Monday morning and be here at sunrise." When Jack returned to the farm that evening, he found his new family waiting anxiously in the kitchen. Sarah ran to meet him at the door, her eyes full of questions. "I got the job," Jack announced, and the entire kitchen erupted in cheers. The children danced around the table while Martha wiped tears of relief from her eyes. "How much?" Sarah asked. Quietly, $60 a month to start, Jack replied, and Sarah gasped. It was more money than the family had seen since her father died. That evening, they sat down together and carefully planned their budget. After setting aside money for the mortgage payment, food, and other necessities, they would even have a small amount left over for improvements to the farm. "We can finally fix the roof properly," Martha said, looking around at the water stains on the ceiling. "And maybe get some new chickens," Emma added. "Mrs. Henderson has some for sale." As the days passed, their new life together began to take shape. Jack would leave early each morning for the Thompson Ranch, where he quickly proved himself to be a capable and reliable worker. The other ranch hands respected him, and Thompson was impressed by his knowledge of cattle and his natural leadership abilities at home. Jack's presence brought stability and security that the family had been missing. He helped with evening chores when he returned from work, played with the children, and spent time talking with Sarah about their plans for the future. But their unusual living arrangement also brought unexpected challenges. The small house had only 2 bedrooms, one that Martha shared with the 3 youngest children. one that had belonged to Sarah, now that she was married to Jack. They were expected to share the room, but the situation felt awkward for both of them. Their marriage had been born out of necessity and mutual respect. But they were still getting to know each other as husband and wife. They had agreed to take things slowly and let their relationship develop naturally. But the cramped living conditions made privacy difficult. One evening, after the children were asleep, Jack and Sarah sat on the porch talking about their day. The conversation eventually turned to their living situation. "I know this isn't easy," Jack said gently, "sharing such a small space with everyone. I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you that you're not ready for." Sarah appreciated his consideration, but she could see the strain the situation was putting on everyone. "The children have been asking questions about why we don't share a room like other married couples they know." "What do you tell them?" "That every family's different," Sarah replied. "But I can see they're confused. And Mama feels bad about the whole situation." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Finally, Sarah spoke up again. "Jack, I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything you've done for us. But I also want you to know that my feelings for you are real. This isn't just gratitude." Jack reached over and took her hand. "Mine are real too, Sarah. I love you, and I love this family. I want us to have a real marriage when you're ready." "Think I'm ready to try," Sarah said softly. "We could start by sharing the room and see how things go from there." Jack squeezed her hand gently. "Are you sure?" Sarah replied. "We're married now, and we should act like it. Besides, the children will be happier if things seem normal." That night, they moved Jack's few belongings into Sarah's room. It was a big step for both of them, but it felt right. As they lay in the narrow bed, talking quietly about their hopes for the future, they both felt that they were truly becoming a family. Winter came early that year, bringing with it the first real test of Jack and Sarah's new marriage. The small house that had seemed cozy during the warm autumn days now felt cramped and crowded as the family spent more time indoors. Snow piled up outside the windows, and the wind howled across the prairie, making everyone feel restless and confined. The children, who had been excited about having Jack as their new father, began to test boundaries as they adjusted to the change. In family dynamics, Tom, now that he wasn't the only male in the house, sometimes challenged Jack's authority. Emma felt jealous when she saw Jack and Sarah holding hands, worried that Sarah wouldn't have as much time for her. Little Mary wanted Jack's constant attention, following him around the house and demanding stories about his cowboy adventures. Martha tried her best to give the newlyweds privacy, but in a house with only 2 bedrooms and a main living area, privacy was hard to come by. She found herself feeling like an outsider sometimes, watching Jack take over many of the responsibilities that had been hers since her dada. One particularly difficult evening in December, tensions came to a head during dinner. Tom had been sulky all day, and when Jack asked him to help with evening chores, the boy exploded. "You're not my real father," Tom shouted, his face red with anger. "You can't tell me what to do." The table fell silent. Emma started crying, and little Mary looked confused and frightened. Sarah felt her heart break as she saw the hurt flash across Jack's face. "Tom," Martha said sharply, "apologize to Jack. This instant." "No," Tom yelled, jumping up from his chair. "I hate this. I hate everything. I want my real papa back." He ran from the room, slamming the door to the bedroom behind him. Sarah started to get up to follow him, but Jack gently put his hand on her arm. "Let me," he said quietly. Jack knocked softly on the bedroom door, then entered to find Tom lying face down on the bed, sobbing into his pillow. Jack sat down on the edge of the bed and waited patiently for the boy's tears to subside. "I know. You miss your papa," Jack said finally. "I never knew my father, but I think if I had and then lost him, I'd feel angry about it too." Tom rolled over and looked at Jack with red, swollen eyes. "Do you really?" "I do." Jack nodded. "And I want you to know something important. I'm not trying to replace your papa. Nobody could do that. I'm just trying to be here for you and your family now, because I love all of you." "But everything's different now," Tom said miserably. "Mama doesn't need me to help her as much, and Sarah's always with you instead of playing with us." Jack understood then what was really bothering the boy. Tom had been trying to be the man of the house since his father died, and now he felt displaced and unneeded. Tom, Jack said seriously, I need your help with something important. This family has so many people in it now, and I'm still learning how to take care of everyone properly. I need a partner, someone who knows this family better than I do. Would you be willing to be my partner in taking care of everyone? Tom sat up, interested despite himself. What do you mean? Well, you know your sisters better than anyone. Could help me understand when Emma's feeling left out or when Mary needs extra attention. You could teach me about the things your papa used to do with the family, so I can make sure those traditions continue. The idea of being needed and important appealed to Tom. You'd really want my help? I'd be grateful for it, Jack said sincerely. What do you say, partner? Tom wiped his nose on his sleeve and nodded. Okay, I'm sorry I said those mean things. All right, Jack replied, ruffling the boy's hair. Let's go back out there and show your family that we're a team. When they returned to the kitchen, everyone looked up anxiously. Tom walked over to where Sarah was clearing the dishes. I'm sorry, Sarah, he said. I didn't mean to upset everyone. Sarah hugged her brother tightly. It's okay, Tom. We're all still learning how to be a family together. As winter progressed, the family gradually found their rhythm. Jack made an effort to spend individual time with each of the children, learning their personalities and interests. He taught Tom to whittle and shared stories of life on the trail. He helped Emma with her reading and listened patiently to her dreams of becoming a teacher someday. He played endless games of pretend with Mary, who loved to imagine that she was a brave pioneer girl. Martha also began to feel more comfortable with the new arrangement. Jack always treated her with respect and often asked for her advice about family decisions. He made it clear that she was still an important and valued member of the household. Meanwhile, Jack and Sarah's relationship continued to deepen. They had moved beyond the awkwardness of their hasty marriage and were discovering that they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. They would stay up late talking after the rest of the family went to bed, sharing their thoughts and dreams for the future. One snowy evening in January, as they sat by the fire while Sarah mended clothes and Jack worked on a piece of leather harness, Sarah brought up something that had been on her mind. Jack, she said, not looking up from her sewing, do you ever regret marrying me? Jack stopped working and looked at her seriously. Sarah, why would you ask that? Because your whole life changed so suddenly. One day you were free, and the next day you had a wife and 3 children. Jack set down his work and moved closer to her. Sarah, look at me. When she raised her eyes to meet his, he continued. I spent years wandering, never belonging anywhere. I thought that was freedom, but it was really loneliness. What I have now is what I was searching for all along. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Even when the house is crowded and chaotic, Jack laughed softly, especially then. Do you know what it's like to come home to people who are happy to see you? To have children run to greet you, and a wife who cares? If you're safe. By February, their sleeping arrangement had become natural. The small bedroom felt cozy rather than cramped. Jack and Sarah would talk quietly in bed, sharing thoughts about the children and their dreams for the future. One warm April morning, as the family sat around the breakfast table making plans for the day's work, Sarah and Jack exchanged a meaningful look. They had decided it was time to share their news. We have something to tell everyone, Sarah began. her face glowing with happiness. The children looked up expectantly, and Martha set down her coffee cup with interest. Jack reached over and took Sarah's hand. "We're going to have a baby," he announced. The kitchen erupted in excitement. The children peppered them with questions about when the baby would arrive and whether it would be a brother or sister. Martha cried happy tears and immediately began making plans for preparing baby clothes and setting up a cradle. "Where will the baby sleep?" Emma asked practically. "There's already no room in this house." Jack and Sarah had already discussed this problem. The small house was barely adequate for their current family size, and adding a baby would make things even more cramped. "Well," Jack said, "I've been talking to Mr. Thompson about some extra work I could do over the summer. If I save up enough money, maybe we could add another room to the house before winter." Tom's eyes lit up with excitement. "Could I help build it? I know how to use a hammer." "I'd be counting on your help, partner," Jack replied, and Tom beamed with pride as they planned and dreamed together that morning. The Mitchell-Morrison family felt truly united for the first time. They had faced the challenges of their unusual beginning together and had emerged stronger, now with a new baby on the way and hopes for expanding their home. The future looked brighter than any of them had dared to imagine just a few months earlier. Summer brought with it the busiest and happiest time the family had experienced since before Sarah's father died. True to his word, Jack had arranged extra work projects that allowed him to earn additional money for the house addition. As his eager assistant and occasional help from neighbors, he began construction of 2 new rooms that would give the growing family much-needed space. Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat made her uncomfortable and tired. Martha took over more of the household duties, delighting in the chance to fuss over her pregnant daughter. Emma and Mary competed to be the most helpful, bringing Sarah cool drinks and fanning her while she rested in the shade. The new rooms began to take shape by midsummer. One would serve as a proper bedroom for Martha and the 2 girls, while the other would become a nursery and eventually a bedroom for the baby and Tom. The main room that Martha is currently shared with all 3 children would become a proper parlor, where the family could gather in the evenings. As Jack worked on the construction, neighbors often stopped by to help or just to visit. Word had spread throughout the community about the cowboy who had married the Mitchell widow and taken on her whole family. Most people admired Jack's character and were happy to see the Mitchell family thriving again. One afternoon in late July, as Jack and Tom worked on installing windows in the new rooms, Tom brought up something that had been on his mind.
"Jack,"
the boy said, carefully holding a piece of glass while Jack secured it in place. "What should I call you now?" Jack paused in his work. "What do you mean?" "Well, you're married to Sarah, so you're like my brother-in-law. But you also take care of all of us like a father would. It's confusing."
Jack
Understood the boy's dilemma. Their family situation didn't fit any traditional categories, and Tom was trying to figure out where everyone belonged. "What would you like to call me?" Jack asked. Tom thought for a moment. "Could I call you Papa Jack? That way you'd be like a papa, but different from our real papa?" Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'd be honored if you call me Papa Jack." When Tom shared his decision with his sisters, they immediately adopted the name as well. Even Martha began referring to Jack as Papa Jack when talking to the children. It seemed to solve the problem of how to define his role in their unusual family structure. By August, Sarah was getting close to her delivery time. The family was making final preparations for the baby's arrival. The nursery was finished and furnished with a beautiful cradle that Jack had built himself. Martha had sewn tiny clothes and blankets. The children had each made a special toy for their new sibling. One warm evening in early September, as the family sat on the porch enjoying the cooler air, Sarah suddenly gripped Jack's arm. "I think it's time," she said quietly. The next several hours were a whirlwind of activity. Martha took charge of the situation with calm efficiency, sending Jack to fetch the midwife from town while she prepared everything needed for the delivery. The children were sent to stay with neighbors, though they protested loudly about missing such an important event. When Jack returned with Mrs. Carson, the experienced midwife, he found Martha had transformed their bedroom into a delivery room. Sarah was walking slowly around the room, breathing deeply through her contractions. "How is she?" Jack asked anxiously. "She's doing fine," Martha assured him. "These things take time, especially with a first baby." Jack paced the kitchen nervously, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. Mrs. Carson occasionally emerged to give him updates, but mostly he just had to wait and worry. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the prairie, Jack heard the cry he had been waiting for. A few minutes later, Martha appeared in the kitchen doorway with tears of joy streaming down her face. "You have a son," she announced. "A beautiful, healthy son." Jack's knees nearly gave out with relief. "And Sarah?" "But fine. She wants to see you." Jack entered the bedroom to find Sarah lying in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets Martha had made. His son, his and Sarah's son. "Hello, Papa," Sarah said softly, smiling up at him. Jack sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby's small red face. "He's perfect," he whispered. "What should we name him?" Sarah asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy. But now, looking at their actual son, Jack had a new idea. "What about James?" he suggested. "After your father." "James Mitchell? Morrison?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Papa would have loved that." When the other children returned home later that morning, they were beside themselves with excitement about their new baby brother. They took turns holding him carefully and marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. "He looks just like Papa Jack," Emma declared, though the baby looked like most newborns, wrinkled and rather undefined. "Can I teach him to whittle when he gets bigger?" Tom asked. "When he's much bigger," Sarah laughed. Little Mary was fascinated by the baby's tiny size. "He's so little," she whispered. "How will he ever get big enough to ride horses like Papa Jack?" "He'll grow," Jack assured her. "Before you know it, he'll be running around getting into trouble with the rest of you." As the days passed, the family settled into their new routine. With baby James, the expanded house felt spacious and comfortable now, with everyone having adequate space and privacy. Martha had her own room with the girls. Tom had his own space in what would eventually be James's room, and Jack and Sarah could finally have true privacy in their bedroom with the baby's cradle nearby. The harvest that fall was the best the farm had seen in years. With Jack's steady income from the ranch and the profits from their crops, they were able to pay off all their debts and even set aside money for future improvements. One evening in October, as the family sat around their expanded dinner table, with baby James sleeping peacefully in Martha's arms, Jack looked around at all the faces he had come to love so deeply. "I have something to say," he announced, standing up with his coffee cup in his hand. "A year ago, I was a lonely man with no family and no real home. I thought I was just looking for work and a meal, but what I found was so much more." He looked at each family member in turn. "Martha, you welcomed a stranger into your home and treated me like a son. Tom, Emma, and Mary, you gave me the chance to be a father when I never thought I'd have children of my own. And Sarah." He paused, looking at his wife with love shining in his eyes. "Sarah, you gave me your heart and made me part of something beautiful." He raised his cup. "To the Mitchell Morrison family, we may not have started out in the traditional way, but we've built something real and strong and lasting together." As the family raised their cups and glasses in response, baby James stirred in Martha's arms and made a small, contented sound. It seemed like even the newest member of their unusual but loving family was agreeing with Papa Jack's toast. Outside, the prairie wind whistled softly around their expanded home, but inside, the Mitchell Morrison family was warm and complete. They had faced uncertainty and challenges together, and they had emerged as a true family, not because of blood or tradition, but because of love, commitment, and the willingness to care for one another through whatever life might bring.